just yet, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. I do have a few notes here. I want to talk about DIY disasters. Okay, we've seen a lot of those rolling through the shop lately, and I'd like to, I guess, first start off by telling you why we don't like them. Okay, when you perform a DIY and you do so with contraindicated materials, the incorrect fabric, crappy adhesive, the improper chemical for the job, you end up causing damage to the fabric. All right, then we have to try to remove what you've done without causing further damage. And so let's start out with the two different types of fabric that we have on these dinghies. We have Hypalon and PVC. Our PVC fabric is kind of like one-ply toilet paper. If you flip over the colored side of it, what you're going to see is another colored side. That's PVC. Not much going on there. Whereas our Hypalon fabric has three layers. We have the colored layer that you see. We have the scrim, which is the gauzy stuff, the next layer down. And then our final layer is the neoprene, which is like the wetsuit material. So we'll see a lot of damage from UV rays on these dinghies, and some of you probably have this. Some of you have moldy, mildewy spots. How do we spot that damage? Well, it starts out as chalky tubes. That's the very beginning, plus the moldy, mildewy spots that you can't seem to remove. There's an easy fix for that. That's to clean and UV treat the dinghy once a month with, we recommend, the 303 aerospace protectant. So I see that I do have someone here, and I'm just kind of waiting for comments to pop up if the feed is working. Okay, we've got you, I believe. I'm just waiting on those if I see something. If not, maybe somebody could holler out. See what's going on here. I apologize for the goofiness. I tested everything yesterday. Had a nice PowerPoint that I will link in the comments. I'll also link it on Offshore Rafting's Facebook page. But let's go back to this now. We've got our two types of fabric. So if you're going to perform a repair, you need to know what type of fabric you have on the boat to begin with. And I can't tell you how many times cruisers will say, I've got a Hypalon vessel and it's PVC. And now we have a DIY with Hypalon adhesive on the PVC vessel. We might even have Hypalon fabric on the PVC vessel. And folks are wondering, why didn't this work? Why did this fail? All right, so we have quite a few hard and fast rules that even I, queen of the nonconformists, has to follow with regard to effective, proper repair. And the number one thing there is climate control. We've got to have that climate control. When you're trying to perform these repairs while your boat is on the back of the big boat, it's not going to happen for you. I mean, it may hold for 2 weeks, and you might pull the, I don't need no stinking dinghy repair technician. Well, those are the people that need us the most, okay? So we're trying to prevent further damage. If you look at the situation with choosing your adhesive, when you go to a reputable shop, they've got quality adhesive and they are making certain that it is fresh, okay? A lot of times if you go to your emergency repair kit, whatever adhesive they've given you may have been of excellent quality, but it also may be beyond its shelf life, so it's not going to work for you. I have a big poster up in the shop that says, improper prep will always come back to bite you in the ass, and that is the absolute truth. You'll see instructions with your emergency repair kit that say, just lightly abrade the fabric, just rough it up a bit and do this and do that. And a lot of times those manufacturers are giving you the emergency kit with those crappy instructions so that you will do something to mess up the boat and thus void your warranty. So as much as I'd like to pay my mortgage on time all the time, I don't charge customers for a repair that's not going to hold or that's not going to be economically practical. So let's talk about the economically practical. If you have a glued seam PVC vessel, and I know a lot of people get sucked into buying the new, shiny, affordable vessel, the construction of those is very poor to begin with. So if you leave those vessels pumped to spec pressure in the Bahamian sun, those tubes are going to expand in the heat of the day, and those glued seams, and there's not much to them, you know, there's this little butt up, those glued seams are going to start to stretch and stress, and then they're going to go kerflooey. And yes, we can clean, prep, re-glue those seams. We'll take them well beyond the area of damage, clean them all up, prep them, re-glue them, and reinforce them. But it's been my experience that with those glued seam vessels, the Chinese PVC vessels, the air is just going to want to blow out the next vulnerable area. So we're going back to that poor construction again. So all too often I'll have to tell a customer, I'm sorry, you know, you paid $1,200 for this little dinghy, and it's going to cost $800 to repair it, and we don't think it's going to hold for a number of seasons. You know, the Zoe Zolita work zone, that's going to be fine, but I can't intuit when or if the rest of it will blow out. So we run into a lot of issues related to this sort of stuff at the shop. Folks will bring in a UV damaged, horribly neglected dinghy that's been DIY'd. We may have huge holes in there. Now, I'm known for bringing boats back from the dead, but when something is that damaged, when you've allowed the UV rays to eat through the colored layer, and now we're in that scrim, that gauzy stuff, and the UV rays dries that layer out as well, now we're looking at neoprene, okay? And again, this is fabric. This stuff is breathable. Let me take this little bit of awning here to show you. See the holes in there. Same deal with your fabric, just smaller holes, okay? A little bit more difficult to see. But if we remove that colored layer and we've got the gauze exposed, it's the same as putting a gauze piece outside in the sun. It's going to dry up. If you took that piece of gauze and stretched it, it's not going to come back to its original shape. Right? And this is what happens with the scrim layer. We're out there in the sun, we've got these boats jacked up to spec pressure in the heat of the day. It's stretching that scrim, and it's now allowing the UV to get through to our neoprene layer, which is our last layer of defense. So when you bring us these damaged vessels, all we're hoping for is to have something good to patch to. Patches do not like to adhere to dry, damaged fabric. Patches do not like to go over seams and accessories, okay? We'll see a lot of these incorrect procedures that have been taken throughout the course of a DIY repair. Example of this is, let's just say you're in a climate that's a little chillier in the fall and winter. So temperature fluctuations will inflate and deflate the tubes on you. The colder it gets, the more the boat deflates, and those heavier accessories, your rub rail, your rigid oar locks, things like that, tend to sag and they'll start to chafe your tubes. And you may find that you've got a worn spot there. Maybe you can't even really see that. You can't see the scrim, but it is worn and it's going to be a leak. We will see folks come in and say, oh, I found it, let me go ahead and patch it. So we slap a patch, half on the oar lock and half on the tube. Well, that's not working because now you've left this butt crack channel for that leak to shoot out to the sides of your patch. And people say, uh-oh, well, that didn't work. Maybe I just needed a larger patch. And before you know it, we've got 18 DIYs with all of the extraneous adhesive that looks like diarrhea around there. And not one of those 18 patches is doing you a damn bit of good. So I just wanted to give you folks the opportunity to ask some questions. Let's get some stuff figured out for you, because every few seasons we'll just see a rash of horrible DIYs. And sometimes I'll ask the customers, where'd you get these harebrained ideas? YouTube. So this is why we don't put a whole lot of content on our YouTube channel. We'll do our our reviews, you know, final reviews of repairs performed. We'll show initial inspections so that you can see what kind of issues we deal with at my shop. Maybe you have similar issues. My advice is always free. You can call, text, email, Facebook message me, whatever you want to do. Get in touch and ask your questions. But I'm going to look here. Dinghies are present in the watch party of Vero. Achilles, Highfield, Walker Bay, woohoo! Zodiac and West Marine, excellent, excellent. Do we have any PVC West Marines? Now, Highfield and West Marine make both Hypalon and PVC vessels. Is anyone stuck dealing with the Chinese PVC version of a West Marine? Okay. I'm not seeing anything yet. I'll give you a chance to type it out if you've got something going on there. But let's go with the brands that we've got. Achilles, in my humble opinion, has no PVC. Woohoo! You guys are awesome. Achilles has, in my humble opinion, the best fabric in the business. It's very, very dense. So when I'm prepping, it takes a really long time and a lot of elbow grease to get through that fabric, to get the pores of it, so to speak, ready to accept the adhesive that I want to add to it. The Achilles takes a beating and just keeps on going. If you had fishing hooks or doggy paws, stuff like that on the Achilles, we normally don't see little scrapes and things like that turn into, oh, the Zodiac is a PVC, okay. We don't normally see those little scrapes turn into leaks just because the fabric is so dense. And I'm going to get down to that Zodiac shortly. Highfield, very good brand. They do make both Hypalon and PVC. The Hypalon vessels are far better quality than the PVC. The Highfields do have the glued seams. One good way to tell that the adhesive is failing across the board on a PVC vessel is to look at the accessories. When we see, let's say you have 8 accessories on the boat itself, and 6 of them are starting to peel off, and your seam reinforcing strips are coming up, that's a pretty good indicator that it's probably not going to be economically practical to repair that vessel. Okay, Walker Bay. That's a goodie. It has, Walker Bays have a fairly thin colored layer of fabric, so it's very important that you apply that 303 UV protectant once a month if you can. Just try to protect that fabric. The Walker Bay boats are going to be more prone to chafing, so we'll see a lot of Walker Bay owners get chaps for those to kind of prevent that chafe when you're dragging the beer cooler over the tubes. On the subject of chaps, what do I think of them? I get asked that question all the time. And do I recommend them? I am told that they are a bitch to sew, and I know that they're expensive. They do a great job to help prevent the chafing. However, the chaps, unintended Grateful Dead reference here, hold the morning dew. And so those moldy, mildewy spots that you see on a lot of vessels can come from having the boat under a tarp or under the chaps with no UV treatment. So even though it's a pain in the rear end to take the chaps off and apply that 303 once a month, you should do it. Okay, Walker Bay with tubes added. The Zodiac. Now oh, they have chaps, okay. Then they know about sewing them, okay. So was that correct? They're a bitch to sew? Always getting questions about, do I have connections that sew them? And I did, but I think those 2 ladies kind of had enough. Okay, the Zodiac is PVC. The Zodiacs have the French-made version, and the French-made versions have welded seams. So although the boat is still PVC fabric, those seams are put together with through a process of heat and compression. And now those seams are actually part of the boat. They're not gonna go kerflooey on you. Worst case scenario, you may get a leak near a seam. Again, from chafing, perhaps from UV damage, where something right next to that seam just wants to open up and we get a leak. Well, now it's not so easy to deal with that. Typically, we don't just place patches over seams because we have two layers of fabric, so to speak. So let's just say this is our patch fabric, and this, my knee, is the seam. Well, there's a bump. You know, there's a difference. This is layered on top of this, and it's still leaving that channel. But because the seams are welded, we often have to take additional measures to deal with leaks near those. All right. I'm going to pull up these notes, and I apologize. My screen keeps taking me away. So proper inflation pressure is an issue with a lot of these vessels. The typical range for the boats that you're mentioning here would be between 2.5 and 3.4 psi. You do not need a fancy gauge. I actually don't even have a working gauge in my shop anymore. I've broken about 58 of them, and I just stopped buying them. What we're looking for when you're going to operate the vessel is that at least the aft chambers, the ones up next to the transom, are drum tight. And the reason for that is your outboards produce a lot of vibration, that blah, 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 blah. If the tubes back there that attach to the transom are underinflated, this is going to be happening in the water all the time, and that vibration is going to want to pull your tubes away from the transom, pull the transom holders away from the tubes. It's going to allow water intrusion. So we want to try to minimize that damage from the vibration. So what you would do is, you know, the dinghy's just sitting around normally. It could be on the davits, on the swim platform, in the water, what have you. You want enough shape in there to keep the rub rail on. Right? When the boat is, the chambers are super saggy, then the rub rail is going to be saggy as well, and then the weight of that is going to want to pull away from the tubes. Same thing with the transom holders, things like that. Okay, I do see something about the UV, and I will get right back to that one. Our inflation pressure, I'll give this example off, and let's just say you're getting up in the morning, it's like 53 degrees, it's chilly. So that dinghy isn't going to be pumped up to spec at 53 degrees. The tubes are going to be pretty soft. Do you want to go to breakfast? So go ahead and pump just those aft chambers to spec so they're drum tight. By drum tight, I mean you can punch the tube and your fist is going to bounce back at you. No squishiness. Off you go to breakfast. Come out and you decide you want to do some swimming and snorkeling. Now the day is heating up. All right, let's just say it's 86 degrees now. Well, you pumped that sucker up to spec in the morning, and now the day is heating up, and the tubes, the air in the tubes is expanding and stretching and stressing your seams. So we don't have to monitor the dinghy constantly. We don't necessarily even have to baby it. We just need to be mindful of what's going on now in the heat of the day. So let a little bit of air out of the valves. Just take the valve cap off, hit that plunger a little bit. The tubes are going to reinflate themselves. But let's take our adventure day a little bit further and say that now we want to go to dinner. It's cocktail hour, we're doing dinner, and we have one of those afternoon thunderstorms, which is going to cool the water, and it's also going to deflate your tubes a little bit. And now it's 9 o'clock at night, and you need to make that run home, and we don't have a whole lot of air in the tubes because of the rain and the chilly temperatures. You're just going to top those aft chambers back off to spec. You can almost always leave the bow super squishy. It's a nicer ride that way. All right, so we did talk about keeping the shape in the tubes, keep those heavier accessories on and keep them from chafing your tube fabric. But in the heat of the day, whether you have a Hypalon or PVC vessel, it's a good practice to just let a little bit of air out of the valves. We'll go back to the UV protectant. I recommend the 303 aerospace protectant. And here's why. First of all, it works really, really well, and it makes the boat look fabulous. But it's also affordable, and it's easy to come by. So you can get that at any West Marine, really any marine store. You can also order it on Amazon. And let's say you got the one that's $16.97 or whatever it is. That should probably last you a full season on 10, 11 foot dinghy. And what we do with it, I don't even remember what the instructions say, but what we do is we take our white terry cloth shop towels and fold them into a square, and we spray the towel, and we work on maybe a 2-foot area of tube at a time. If you've cleaned the boat prior to applying the UV protectant, that UV will go on pretty nicely. If you spray it directly onto the boat, it will streak. Any of those protectants will streak. That's why we use the cloth. If you did not wash the dinghy ahead of time and you're spraying your cloth and wiping it on there, you may see a lot of gray, a lot of chalkiness, a lot of filth showing up on the cloth, and that's indicating that your UV protectant isn't really seeping into the fabric. So it's a good idea to give the boat a wash, a scrub down. We use palm olive and water in our inspection bottles. We use palm olive and water for a lot of our cleanings, but you can use any inflatable boat cleaner at all. I used to recommend Mary Kate, but apparently that's being discontinued. You can use any of those that are actually made for your tubes. I would stay away from the bleach, the, what do you call this, magic erasers, household products, no go on there. So August Race, that's a good product as well. It's a lot of money, and some folks are saying that it's not as easy to come by, so I do recommend the 303 protectant. What I'm going to do when we finish this up is I'll put a bunch of links on Offshore Rafting's page. I'll post this video there as well, so that you can look at my PowerPoint. You know, we started out with PVC versus Hypalon. We'll go back to that. I'm on that screen now. The PVC vessels typically come with a 3 or 5 year warranty. We talked about the thin fabric, the 1-ply toilet paper, very susceptible to UV damage and spills, even your suntan oil. Prone to seam failure as well when they have glued seams. Hopefully the Zodiac folks there have the French-made Zodiac, but the Zodiac Zooms are typically the Chinese version. Hypalon vessels usually come with a 10-year warranty. You've got the 3 layers of fabric, and the Hypalon's a lot more resistant to the UV damage and fuel spills and things of that nature. I'm on our Ultimate No-Nos page right now. Never use silicone-based products on your tubes. What that does is it prevents any patches from ever wanting to adhere there again. We have had luck in removing silicone, but we've had to much further damage the fabric in order to get it all out of there to be able to patch. We want to, this is going to have everybody cringing, avoid 5200 and Gorilla Glue like the plague. 5200 is for through-hole connections. It is not the shit that should be on your tubes. And it is a real pain in the rear end to remove, and it often takes your colored layer of fabric with it when we take it off, even gently. Okay, we don't want to leave PVC, glued seam PVC vessels unprotected in the sun or pumped to spec pressure. Again, it's good practice to just, in the heat of the day, let some air out of those tubes. Worst case scenario, pump up the aft chambers when you're getting ready to operate. This seems like a silly one, but don't place an outboard on a boat that has transom or tube to transom issues. The weight of that outboard could, if your transom holders, your crescent guys aren't holding well, or your transom holders up top aren't holding well, the weight of that outboard could pull the transom aft, and there's the outboard in the water, and so are you. Unintended swim. Okay, in case of emergency, we're going to have some temporary repair tutorial links that I'll post. Those are already on our YouTube channel. I believe there are 3. Want to use Gorilla Tape. That's safe, and it's got a pretty good hold factor, I would say. Also, once you're able to get the boat to a reputable repair shop, your repair tech can easily remove that Gorilla Tape without causing damage to your fabric, and he or she isn't going to want to choke you because you did the 18 patch thing with all the extraneous diarrhea around there. We do walk you through that process, but just briefly I'll mention it here. Let's say you've got a scrape in the top of your tube and there's a little pinhole in there. We can take acetone, those white terry cloth shop towels, and the Gorilla Tape, and a wooden spoon. It's all you need. You can ditch that repair kit with the adhesive beyond its shelf life and whatnot. These are the things you need. So we're going to clean that tube with the acetone. Get that cloth fairly wet. We'll wipe off all the muck and the grime. We're going to let it flash off. Go do something for 5 minutes. Take 5 sips of a cocktail. Come back. Do another acetone wipe. Go do something for 5 minutes. Come back. Do one more wipe. All right, now here we are. We've got to deal with this leak. We have enough air in the boat to give the tube shape. We're going to take our first piece of Gorilla Tape and we're going to try to center the leak in that piece of tape if we can. All right, now mind you, the boat is still leaking while you're doing this. So as you get that first piece of tape down over the leak itself, gently place it, bring it out, center out with your fingers. Now we can take the wooden spoon and bone it kind of in a star-shaped pattern, again, from the center out, from the leak out, pushing that tape down. We can now, that's holding there, okay, again, it's still leaking because we're not finished. We can let a little bit of air out and start adding more layers of this tape. You could do it in the waffle pattern, whatever you want to do to totally cover that leak. Will the tape peel? Sure it will. You know, if you're in the Bahamas for a few months and you've got all kinds of activity, people are jumping in from snorkeling and stuff, absolutely it will. But you've not used anywhere near a full roll of tape, you've not used your entire container of acetone, and you could reuse the same cloth again. So it's a very cheap way to safely, temporarily repair your vessel. We can do something similar with Sikaflex 291 or Marine Goop, and I believe I have a tutorial on that safe temporary repair as well. So it's going to take me a few minutes when we finish here to post all those links for you, but you'll have them, including the PowerPoint. So we did our no-nos, case of emergency, the maintenance stuff. We discussed the 303 aerospace protecting. Try to keep the boat covered whenever possible. And what I mean by that is just try to keep your tubes out of the sun. If you've got davits, you know that one side of that vessel is always getting the sun. So in that case, maybe you do want to add the UV protectant to the bottom of the tubes. You know, if you're up like this, just look at things, try to keep the vessel clean and try to keep that protectant on there. Keep the valves clean. A lot of times we'll have folks get a repaired boat back from us, and a week will go by and they'll say, well, we took it out 3 times and something's still leaking, something's not right. Well, it's my policy to re-repair anything that we've done that has failed in a reasonable amount of time at no charge. So we'll race out there, go get the boat, bring it back, do an inspection, and it turns out that maybe they had sand in the hand pump, and they've gotten that debris inside the valve, and the valve simply didn't close properly. So although we don't want to be taking a fire hose and adding a bunch of water to our tubes, you can take your spray bottle with a water and palm olive mix and open the valve, give a couple of squirts in there, close the valve, spray that plunger, you know, the little spring on the plunger, spray around there. That's totally fine to do, and a lot of times that'll help wash out pieces of dirt, sand, shells, things like that that may get in there and prevent either the valve, the plunger, from closing, or the membrane behind it, the little clapper guy, from closing. Let's see here. I apologize for looking down at the notes. You can contact us to perform an annual inspection, and we have several customers who do this. They don't want to deal with doing the entire inspection and going through that process. They also don't trust themselves to find some of the minor issues before they become major ones. But you really don't need me for those inspections. I'll tell you what our process is. Anytime we get a boat in the shop, we inspect the entire thing 3 times over. We note anything and everything that we see that's goofy with it so that you folks know we're paying attention. We prepare a quote for the whole shebang. It's our job to note everything that's wrong, and then allow you folks to come back and say, well, no, I don't care about the oar locks, just fix my gash and get me back on the water. So how do we go about this? We cheat a lot at the shop because we've got to inflate and deflate vessels all the day long, and I don't want to be doing it with a hand pump constantly. So we have a shop vac and a little camping pump to get shape into the tubes, and we're always inflating from aft to forward. So we'll do that with the shop vac. That's taken a lot of our pumps away that would be required. And now I'm going to go top off to spec pressure with the hand pump. Now I'm going to make everything drum tight again from aft to forward because these chambers communicate with each other. Now I'm going to take my water and palm olive mix and I'm going to spray every inch of that vessel. I've got my routine. I'll start at the port cone and I'll spray from the rub rail up everything that I can see on that tube, and I'll go all the way around to the starboard side cone. And while I'm standing there now, I'll lean in and I'll spray the inside of the port side all the way down to the hull. I'm spraying the valves. I'm looking for leaks. I'm looking for worn fabric. I'm looking for detached accessories. Once I get the whole top of the vessel done, I have to contort and go check the bottom. I'm checking the tube to hull strip connections, all of the fabric surrounding the transom holders, again, accessories, the rub rail, D-rings, all of those things I'm looking for detachment. Aft to forward inflation as a rule and general habit, yes. And it's hard to explain to you why. I just know this. This has been a lot of years, but the chambers do communicate with each other. So let's say you're out and about and a shark bites your bow chamber. You're going to lose, even though the baffles, the tubes within the tubes are separate for each of your chambers, sometimes the baffles let loose. In other words, one will bust, and now our air that we've got in the aft chamber is leaking out forward. You'll know if you have busted baffles if you go to inflate, let's just say, your port aft chamber, and the bow inflates with it, or the entire vessel. That's not the end of the world. Like, I would not charge you to cut into the boat, deal with the baffle, and then put everything back together again. It's not something that you need to worry about. Just be aware that if you are inflating one valve and the entire vessel is inflating, that indicates the baffles are shot. But aft to forward seems to help hold that air at spec in the aft chambers. And then typically your bow chamber is a larger chamber. Many of you just have 3 valves on the boat. Obviously, some of the larger vessels have more. Some of the small vessels have 4 valves. But this is just a really good practice. Instead of going to the next one in line, I'm sorry, I got the sun halo that's switcheroo. Okay. And that way you know now that that aft chamber is jacked up. If we have a severely damaged vessel come in and I see DIY all over the place and I know that we have holes, I probably don't have enough time to inflate the vessel from aft to forward to spec pressure and get my spray and check every inch of it, because I'm going to be losing air from the holes very quickly. So in that case, if you know that you have an issue and you want to find the exact location and see what's going on there, I will sometimes just take the port aft chamber, pump it up with the shop vac, pump it up to spec with the hand pump, and I'll inspect just that chamber so that I can find that fast leak and show the customer exactly what's going on there. And then I'll go and do the starboard chamber, pump that up to spec, and inspect it alone. And that gives me the opportunity to at least have enough air in there to get the issues videoed for the customer. And then I'll go do the bow chamber. But aft to forward, good way to do it. And that way you know that you've pumped to spec. If that's your habit, you know, port side, starboard side, bow chamber. And that's why I spray in that order. This way, if I'm tired or I'm cranky or I'm distracted, I know I'm doing this the same way all the time. And a lot of times I'll go around a boat that has very minor issues and I'll make my first round with my spray and I don't see anything at all. No big leaks. I don't hear any hissing. I often touch the tube after I've sprayed that soapy water on there, because sometimes you won't see the bubbles and you may not hear them, but if your hand grazes over a little pinhole, you can kind of feel that bubbling under there. So this is the way that we look for these issues. But if a vessel has only creamers, we call them creamers, the very minor leaks, like the foamy cappuccino looking guys, it'll take a bit for those to show up, even with that soapy water and even with the tubes pumped to spec pressure, in order to find those issues. But you should be able to see if you've got detachment of your rub rail, for example. We will not completely remove, prep, and re-glue a rub rail if we only have a couple of areas that are detached. We do want to get in there and clean, prep, and tack them down. Anything that's large enough for us to get in there and clean, prep, and tack down, we do typically recommend that for the customer. We often throw that stuff in as a freebie, because you don't want water getting in to that little area of detachment and sitting and pooling in there and then attacking the rest of the adhesive of the rub rail. And that holds true with a lot of your accessories. If you've got a handle that's started to pull away and the rainwater is in there, you'll notice that the rest of the glue gets really boogery, tacky, and the handle's going to want to pull away. Let's see. These inspections, I know a lot of you can't get access to the entire vessel easily when it's on the back of the big boat. In that case, if you can get it pumped to spec while it's in the water, you can monitor the water for any leaks that you may have on the bottom of the tubes. And then, of course, while you're sitting in the boat, you could spray the top and then just check your other items there. So again, you don't need us for that. You don't need us to clean the boat. But what I wanted to do with this talk today was kind of prevent you from running into issues that you didn't need to run into. So if we look at a simple repair, let's just say we need one patch on an open field of tube. Our charge for that is $159. And if you need 10 patches, I don't charge $159 10 times. I operate this business in a manner that would make Jerry Garcia look down kindly upon me. So I look at the job as a whole and I say, we got to do a rub rail and now we need 5 patches. Well, we're going to do the rub rail and we'll often throw those patches in for free. But if you look at that $159 and equate it to what you would spend when you're going to West Marine or any other store or ordering your adhesive, one, you've got to order that adhesive, right? So you're buying perhaps a lot more than you need for your one patch. And you could say, well, I'll have that, I'll have it on hand. Well, you probably won't have another issue with the boat for a year, because this is the way these things go, right? So now you've spent your $70 on the gloves, any PPE that you want, your that nature. And by the time you do that and get the fabric and your sandy materials, depending on what exactly you have to do for prep, your chances are you've hit that 159 mark already. And then if you're performing the repair while it's on the back of the big boat, it's going to fail. And you probably wouldn't have cleaned the extraneous adhesive off, so now it's ugly. And when we see these DIYs, I feel terrible. One, because I know the aggravation that the customer went through attempting the DIY and wasting an afternoon messing around with this stuff that has since failed. And two, it's taken away from the resale value of the boat. And a lot of you may say, I don't give a shit what the boat looks like. Okay, you don't, right? But then it comes time to put an end to your cruising days and you're trying to sell that dinghy that's been DIY'd or it's been neglected. And you call me and say, what's it worth? Well, it's not worth anything like that. If the DIYs are leaking and the boat looks like garbage. So we want to prevent some of those things. That it does save you money in the end, and the proper maintenance saves you money if you can spot these minor issues before they become major ones. I would love to hear about any issues that you're currently having. Is there anything that's confusing you? Because I don't really feel like we had an in-depth discussion of everything. I mean, these links that I'm going to post for you may help. And of course, you can always call. But anything, any burning questions right now? Anything going on that we should talk about with anyone's vessel? saving us from ourselves, yes. All too often I get in my own way, but you know, we don't like to see the DIYs. And we do have a DIY fee because often a job that might take us 5 hours to complete and we're able to give the customer a quick turnaround, now it takes, you know, 14 hours because of the DIY and the way in which we have to remove it, or now we're needing a much larger patch to cover that area of damage. We've got a horrible one in there right now. I will show you some of the photos that my helper's been sending to me. When I used to do the presentations at the Oriental In-Water Boat Show, we kept a wall of shame slideshow for all of the disastrous DIYs, you know, showing the 18 patches and the 5,200, the roofing tar, the house paint, the Gorilla Glue. Gorilla Tape, just the regular, like, duct tape Gorilla Tape is perfect for this. Get yourself a roll of that, throw a little thingy of acetone, the white terry cloth shop towel, the roll of tape, and a wooden spoon or other blunt implement into a Ziploc bag or a dry bag. Chuck that in your bow locker and you are good to go. And you're gonna find that whole repair process is a lot faster, easier, and more affordable than trying to use the patch fabric. A lot of times we'll see cruisers selling a boat and somebody's given them a repair kit, maybe for a PVC boat, and they're selling a Hypalon vessel, and the poor people get it on the other end like, what have I, you know, something's not right here. This isn't working. Why isn't this working? Okay, so we need to know what fabric we have to know how to deal with it. The more that you can maintain or protect your tube fabric, the better off the dinghy is going to be. So for example, if you have too happy of a happy hour and you smash into a dock and you put an 18-inch gash in the vessel, but you have been occasionally washing it and occasionally UV treating it, then we're able to have good fabric to patch to. We'll get a nice inside patch in that gash for you. I am the inside patch master. And then we'll come back and we'll prep and put the outside patch on, and that's gonna hold beautifully and it's gonna look great, as opposed to a vessel that's been DIY'd where now, you know, this one I just mentioned had fiberglass resin, which is like shards of shrapnel that we're having to deal with on these tubes, again, fabric. Is there any status quo for inflation as a happy medium? Okay, happy medium. It depends on what time of day you're going out, I guess, or what your temperatures are. Punching like drum tight, I've got an AB on the bow now. When we finish up, I'll walk you up there and punch on that. I know that I pumped it to spec. Recently, I was dealing with a valve issue and putting some sealant in there, but we have had some chillier nights, so it's probably not to spec right now. If you punch on that, my helper Joe always says it should sound like a timpani, just one good punch. You can tell if you have overinflated the vessel. There's no give whatsoever. I mean, you can, if you touch it, if you push on it, you would be saying to yourself, oh boy, I think that's too much air. So what happens sometimes is folks will pump it up in the morning, and now the day is heating up and those tubes are expanding, and now it's not your fault that this is going on, that there's too much air. The heat of the day did it to you. So that's when you just want to let some air out. You can basically just have enough air to keep shape in the tubes. If you are floating about, if you're snorkeling, swimming, picnicking on the beach, all of that stuff, you don't need to worry about having the tubes drum tight. If it's super hot outside, you don't want those tubes drum tight with the sun beating down. You would have to just add a few pumps to those aft chambers to top them off in cooler temperatures to prevent the vibration of the outboard. And maybe I'll give you folks a little bit of homework. Next time you're going somewhere, turn and look at the tubes. Watch what they're doing when you're running. Watch what they're doing as you get up on plane. and see how much vibration you have, and maybe mess around, add a couple of pumps of air and see if you can't get them tighter. Valve sealant, it's not valve sealant. I had a valve issue and I was also adding interior sealant, and I'm glad that you brought this one up. Interior sealant, sort of like Fix-A-Flat for okay, I think we're back. Simply coating the fabric on the inside of the tube. A lot of people think that the interior sealant is going to stop leaks like it would for your bicycle. That sealant, interior sealant, is for pinhole leaks and minor creamers. Again, going back to those foamy guys. The sealant will not stop an actual leak. Certainly won't stop one that's hissing. Oh, can repeat it. Okay, so we're on interior sealant, which is like the Fix-A-Flat, but for a dinghy. It's not foamy, it doesn't expand. It's simply a liquid that goes into, it gets put in through the valve, and it coats the inside of the tubes. That's only for very, very minor leaks. If you actually have a hole in the boat, or you have a leak that you can hear, or big clear bubbles coming out of there, that sealant isn't going to cut it for you. And we have a lot of customers that have tried it, or have tried the foam insulation, I think it's called. Like, you could spray it in a gap in a closet or something like that, and it expands. It's this yellowish stuff, and it should seal the gaps for you. Someone had put that in a vessel before, and what happens when the customers are doing this is they're thinking more is better, more is not better, or if it expands, it's got to cover everything, right? This is going to be great. But it just hardens into a huge booger, and now that booger is bouncing around on the inside of the tube, chafing the tube from the inside out every time that you operate that vessel. So we don't recommend that you try to do the sealant yourself. Another reason we don't recommend it is folks are constantly messing up the valves with this sealant. It does dry. It, in the end, looks brownish and very cellophane-y. But a good bunch of it in a certain area. And so folks get the sealant on the valve plunger, the spring, or on the inside of the valve can't close because the sealant has gummed up around there. And so oftentimes we'll have to take the entire valve out and clean that stuff, if it's even possible. I've seen it applied so poorly that it completely mucked up the valve, and the valve wouldn't open or close, and I had to cut it out of the boat. And then if you need an interior sealant treatment thing that's unobtrusive, which the sealant is, right? There's no patch, just the sealant itself, then prepping and patching and having your boat for a few. Got it on the repeat. And do not use the great stuff, because nobody wants the booger. I mean, seriously, some people just don't think of this kind of stuff. And that brings me to a newer product maybe some of you have heard of. It's an Inflate-A-Saver, and it seems like a great idea to a point. All right, what this is basically a balloon that you will put inside the valve, place it with their valve, but now you have this new balloon that is supposed to inflate and make basically the outside of your tube not important anymore. That if you had leaks or damaged fabric, well, you've got this balloon in there. It's not the case though. Let's just say we had 4 AB vessels lined up together, and they're all the 10 VS. They're the same model. They're the same year. It's the same boat. You look at them and you think, well, these are quadruplets, right? But they're not. Even when the factory is building these boats, they end up being, the boats, not the factory, not symmetrical. So we could have two ABs in, and we're doing these tube to hole strip jobs, and we'll note one has the strip starting in a certain area, 4 inches aft of the transom or what have you. That's all technical garbage that you don't need to hear, but the point is they're not the same, they're not symmetrical. So to think that you could take a balloon and put it inside of that tube and it's going to cover every millimeter that your inflation air would cover is just not, it's not logical. And so you take the example of the 4 ABs and use that inflate-a-saver on 4 of them. Those balloons aren't going to reach everything that they need to reach in there, plus the dinghy still looks like crap on the outside. Why palm olive? I'm a child of the 70s, but that's not the only reason. Dawn seems to be very thick. It's great for doing your dishes, but it doesn't often show us the issues, the smaller leaks, or even the faster ones that we're looking for when we're performing those inspections. Palm olive seems to be a much lighter mix, and something with the green color seems to help once it's on the tube as well. It's just easier for us to spot stuff with the palm olive. We have used Dawn, when I've forgotten to order the palm olive or Joe has put it somewhere. It doesn't tend to find it. We have gone to Dawn, but I think we lost feed again. That palm olive bottle either. Okay, one Achilles has a folding transom that relies on the hypalon seam to secure it. Maintenance for that model. The folding transoms, they're a great idea and definitely a space saver, but those boats, whether they be a West Marine, I think a Walker Bay also has a folding transom, then the Achilles, they don't actually like to be folded. When you put that transom down to the inside of the boat and you are folding in your tubes and you're starting to roll up, let's picture what that might look like for the rub rail. Now, the tubes are deflated, and as the rub rail is getting rolled over and over, it's making what I call pinch points. It's pushing that rub rail out into a triangle, and thus it's wanting to push it out away from the tubes. You'll notice detachments of oar locks and sometimes the transom holder fabric on those vessels. There's not much that we can do about it. Achilles, again, is a great brand, so I wouldn't really expect that you'd have a lot of those issues where the transom fabric surrounding is coming detached or coming detached enough to be a problem for you, but you are always welcome to take a photo and send me a text and let me get a peek at it. We can go back to our safe temporary repair. Let's just say that the hypalon was coming away from the crescent guys, the transom itself. You can always clean the crescent guy, the transom, the tube with the acetone, and do your Gorilla Tape repair. And it's a good way to get by for a while. Sometimes you don't need to see us right away, even if you do have rub rail coming off or detachment around the transom like that that's very, very minor. You can get by with the Gorilla Tape, although it's not aesthetically pleasing. But you can deal with that for a whole other season, and that way you'll let the rest of the stuff start to fall apart. So when you bring the boat to us, we can do some things for you, kind of hit that all at once and not stress about the small stuff, I guess. The folding transom is on a rigid bottom. Okay, cool. So a lot of times we'll get water in there. On that rigid bottom, there's the piece of hypalon that comes right across below the bailer on the inside of the boat. And we're always having sand there, right? And the bailer's there. So you might see peeling or a little bit of detachment of that fabric. I know I mentioned earlier, don't put an outboard on a vessel that has transom issues or tube to transom issues or transom fabric to tube issues, anything like that. If it's just a minor bit of detachment, like a finger swipe worth, that's not anything to worry about, but you can use the Gorilla Tape method. Now, I'm backing up on these comments because I said I would come back to something. We did talk about the Gorilla Tape. I just want to make certain I'm answering everyone's questions. And our valve sealant, okay, I think we got it. Yeah. So really the biggest thing that you can do to make certain that if you have a whoopsie that we or your chosen repair tech has something good to patch to is just keep the boat mostly clean and do that UV treatment. Try to keep air in the vessel to give it shape, to keep the heavier accessories still attached. If you spot a minor issue, we can deal with it with the Sikaflex, the marine goop, the Gorilla Tape method safely and very affordably. And you can just kind of run with that. If you have 3 areas of rub rail that you wanted to tack down with the Gorilla Tape or whatever, and just wait until more of the rub rail's fallen off to come see us, then you can do that. You know, that's a thing. We just want to be able to find the minor issues before they become major ones. Here's an example. AB, great brand, had, I think, the 2015 or 2016 models of these aluminum vessels. They didn't get the primer on the aluminum, and so when they glued the tube to hole strips, these I call them the fat guys, on the bottom of the vessel, the lack of primer allowed the hull to get oxidized, and so it would be pitted, and then the tube to hole strips would start to pull away, and customers were calling to say, I'm getting water intrusion. It's coming up from the bottom of the boat because the tube to hole strips aren't attached. Now that's one example of something going really, really wrong, and I will tell you that that company absolutely stands behind their work, and they handled a lot of warranty repairs. They offered all of those. They are a joy to work with. But these tube to transom, tube to hole issues can happen on any brand of boat. It doesn't have to be an aluminum boat. It could be fiberglass. So it's something, if you get a chance to look at the bottom of your vessel, go around and grab at that fabric. Just check those things. Make sure everything's okay. If everything's not okay, we can do a safe temporary repair to get by for a while, or you can make an appointment and bring the boat in. You guys, you have any other questions? Should we go look at the AB? Okay. And while I'm waiting, I want to thank everyone and thank the Cruisers Net for always promoting us and having me here today. I'm sorry if this particular presentation was a bit jumbled. We did try, yesterday afternoon I worked on getting the split screen. I thought, wouldn't this be great if I could show them the PowerPoint? It's just a couple of pages of stuff, but it's a nice quick reference. And be speaking at the same time, but apparently this filthy hippie is not that high tech. I mean, I got both screens up, but it shut down one. All right, let's go look at the boat. Here we go. Bear with me. Flip us around. Okay. So here's the AB. Okay, this is not to spec. We've had a chillier day. This has got a little bit of give. See that? A little bit of give. Let's check the bow. And that's about the same. You hear, it's kind of like a dull, what could I equate it to? Not really sure. If I were to have this pumped to spec, it would be a higher pitched sound and my fist would bump right back. This would feel not at all squishy. See how I can make those wrinkles? All right. So this pressure though is totally fine for the vessel. If you're just sitting around, you know, or you're snorkeling or whatever, even in the heat of the day, having it just be kind of that squishy is good. That works. And that's going to keep the rub rail on and the accessories on. That particular vessel had been a little bit neglected before I met my boyfriend, and I've gone and added some Treadmaster to stop chafing, and we've painted and we've patched leaks and we've tacked down tube to hole strips, and we've done, you know, all of the normal nitpicky maintenance things that should be done for that. And right now he is not here. He's got a Dinghy prototype that he had built, and it looks I think you've seen the OC tenders. This is not an inflatable vessel. I would have liked to have shown it to you, but we had that boat out here earlier when I was preparing for the broadcast or the live stream, and all we could hear was thunk, 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 thunk in the water, and I figured you guys won't hear anything that I had to say, so I'm going to call him back and see if he wants to take a little sunset cruise. But I hope that all of you are safe. I'm sorry about the cold weather that you're dealing with right now. If you have questions, again, if you give me just a few to get all of these links to things posted on Offshore Rafting's Facebook page, I think that's going to be the easiest for me to do. I'll take this live stream, put a link to it when it's available over there, and I'll just keep throwing up the links for the temporary repair tutorials, plus the PowerPoint and other things. The Treadmaster, one of my parka, the Treadmaster, he had chosen to have one big piece at the bow. That's an AB up there, so one large piece at the bow, just above the logo pad, and then two large pieces back by the outboard, and I think two other pieces kind of halfway down the tubes. And it was the first time I had done that for someone. That was the first time I met him. He had requested that, and I said, well, that's a cool idea, you know. And it works out well. It's just that the stuff is fairly thick and rigid, so the corners are always wanting to peel up. That boat has been kept in Maryland for a bit, so obviously it gets very cold there. The tubes will deflate in the winter, and so the corners always need to be tacked down. But it was a very good idea, especially to if you're provisioning or something like that and you want to step onto the bow from the dock. That's a nice grippy stuff to do. So you can always request that at Offshore Rafting. We can order it for you, and what we do in that case is just we'll cut a piece and put it where we think you may want it. It will take a video and show you and say, you like this location? You want more, less? What should we do? And we'll go ahead and get that glued on for you. Thank you guys. I do not have my parka on now. I was actually in shorts and a t-shirt earlier when the sun was out. It was maybe 74 here in Little Harbor today. And of course, just before I got to meet up with all of you, the wind started going and the sun is kind of tucking behind the clouds, so I'm freezing at the moment. Thank you so much, but please don't hesitate to call, text, email. Anytime you want to get in touch, just let me know that you're with the Vero Cruisers group. That'd be great, just so I know that you've tuned into this. Send photos, whatever you need. Again, my advice is always free. If we have any kind of specials running, like right now we have a special on the anti-foul paint for the bottom. We know how Vero is Barnacle City, so a lot of folks need that. We just decided to run a special. We're running a special on the cleaning and UV treatment, so we do it for you, get all the muck off of there. As many of the spots that we can get out, we'll get out, and then we go ahead and seal all of that with the UV. We do have a UV treatment tutorial, and I'll put that link up as well, so you can see how we do it and kind of save product and save time with that. Okay, so Happy New Year. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to sign off. Bye, everyone.